I never imagined a single phone call could unravel everything I thought I knew about family. But when my mother's voice, sweet as honey, drifted through the line, I felt a spark of hope I hadn't known in years. "Danielle, come home for dinner," she said, her words wrapping around me like a warm blanket. "It's been too long since we've all been together." At 40, I'd built a life in San Francisco, far from the Sacramento house where I grew up. But that invitation stirred something deep, a longing for connection I thought I'd buried. Little did I know that dinner would be a trap, a perfectly staged betrayal that would shatter my world. 2 weeks ago, I sat in my sleek office, the San Francisco skyline glittering through the window, when my mother called. Her voice was softer than usual, lacking the sharp edge that often accompanied her requests for money or favors. I hesitated, my fingers tracing the edge of my desk. For over a decade, my parents' affection had felt conditional, a transaction tied to what I could provide. But a part of me, the part that still remembered family vacations and laughter around the dining table, wanted to believe this time was different. Maybe they missed me. Maybe they saw me as more than a checkbook. So I cleared my packed schedule, canceled a client meeting, and made the 90-mile drive to Sacramento, the highway stretching before me like a thread of possibility. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the familiar red brick house glowed under the evening sun, its windows catching the light like old memories. Inside, the dining room was a picture of warmth. Flickering candles cast shadows on the walls, the vintage chandelier sparkled above, and the rich aroma of beef stew filled the air. My mother greeted me with a smile, her arms open wide. My father nodded from his seat, his eyes soft but distant. Parker, my younger brother, lounged at the table, his smirk barely hidden. Olivia, my 28-year-old sister, twirled a strand of hair, her green eyes glinting with something I couldn't place. I sat down, my heart light with hope, the clink of silverware a gentle rhythm against the promise of a warm evening. But that promise shattered faster than a dropped wine glass. Barely 10 minutes into dinner, Parker leaned back, his voice smooth as polished stone. "To avoid any misunderstandings later, Mom and Dad want you to know now," he said, pausing for effect. "The will, everything, the house, the Tahoe villa, it's all going to Olivia and me." The words hit me like a blade, slicing through the warmth of the room. I set my fork down, the stew suddenly heavy in my stomach. "What?" I managed, my voice dry as dust. My mother sighed, her face a mask of practiced calm. "Your father and I have finalized it, Danielle. You have your career, your house. You don't need it. Parker and Olivia do." I turned to my father, praying he'd refute it, that this was some cruel joke. But he only stared into his wine glass, his silence louder than any words. My chest tightened, a cold ache spreading through me. I'd driven 90 miles for this, left behind my work, my life, for a family I thought might finally see me. But the candles, the chandelier, the stew, it was all a lie, a carefully orchestrated trap to deliver their verdict. I wasn't their daughter. I was an outsider, my sacrifices invisible, my place in their hearts erased. As Parker's smirk widened and Olivia's eyes gleamed with triumph, I realized the dinner wasn't a reunion. It was an ambush, and I'd walked right into it. The dining room, once a cocoon of warmth, turned suffocating, the candlelight now casting jagged shadows across my family's faces. Parker's words about the will echoed in my skull, each syllable a hammer striking my trust to pieces. My mother's calm justification, that I didn't need the inheritance because of my career, felt like a slap, and my father's silence was a betrayal of its own. At 40, I'd built a life I was proud of, but sitting at that table, I felt like a child, small and unseen. My fork rested beside my plate, the stew untouched, as a storm brewed in my chest. I couldn't stay quiet. Not this time. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You're saying I get nothing, after everything I've done?" My words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Parker shrugged, his smirk infuriatingly casual. "You've got your fancy job, Danielle. Olivia and I need more support." Olivia chimed in, twirling her hair with a mocking smile. Yeah, you're doing fine. Why be greedy? Greedy? The word ignited something in me, a spark that flared into fury. Greedy? I repeated, my voice rising. Let's talk about what I've done for this family. For years, I've paid the mortgage on this house, $1,500 a month. I've covered utilities, water, electricity, and internet, another $600. I paid $40,000 to renovate the Tahoe villa because you, I pointed at my mother, said it was a family asset. My mother crossed her arms, her gaze cold as winter. Danielle, there's no need to overreact. We've thought this through. Parker and Olivia need a foundation to build their lives. I laughed, but it was hollow, a sound that echoed my disbelief. A foundation? Olivia, you're 28 and haven't held a job longer than 6 months. Parker, how many majors have you switched? 5? 6? And you've paid for every single one of his tuition fees, I said, turning to my parents. I've been the one keeping this family afloat, and you call me greedy? Olivia rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with mockery. Oh, so you're keeping tabs on every dollar? That's disappointing, Danielle. You're rich. Do you need to be so stingy? Stingy. The accusation burned, twisting the knife deeper. This isn't about money, I snapped, my heart pounding. This is about fairness. I've put my dreams on hold. Travel, a bigger home, investments, because I was paying for you, and now you act like I'm invisible? My father finally looked up, his eyes weary but offering no defense. Danielle, we love all our children, he mumbled, the words empty. Love? I scoffed, my laughter sharp and bitter. If this is love, it's a one-way street. I've poured hundreds of thousands into this family, and you repay me by writing me out of your lives. My mother slammed her hand on the table, the glasses rattling. Enough, Danielle. Stop acting like a victim. You always think about money. We did this because we care about Parker and Olivia. Her words were a blade, slicing through the last threads of my hope. I stared at her, then at Parker's smug grin, Olivia's indifferent shrug, and my father's averted gaze. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. I wasn't their daughter. I was their bank, a resource to be drained and discarded. The realization settled in my bones, cold and clear. I gripped the edge of the tablecloth, my knuckles white, and stood, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'm done, I said, my voice low but unshakable. My mother blinked, her facade cracking. What did you just say? I met her gaze, unflinching. I'm done. No more payments, no more sacrifices. You don't need me and I don't need you. Parker laughed, a nervous edge to it. You're going to cut us off over this? Grow up, Danielle. My mother's voice turned sharp. If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. I paused, my hand on the doorframe, a smirk curling my lips. Don't worry, I said, my words like ice. I won't. I stepped into the night, the Sacramento air cool against my skin, my heart pounding with rage and resolve. They thought they could use me forever, but they were wrong. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was free, and they'd soon learn what that meant. The 90-mile drive back to San Francisco felt like a lifeline, the highway lights streaking past my windshield like fleeting promises of freedom. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my heart still racing from the confrontation in Sacramento. At 40, I'd spent over a decade believing family was my anchor, but that dinner had revealed the truth. They were a weight, dragging me under. As the city skyline emerged, glittering against the night, I felt a shift inside me, not just anger, but clarity. I wasn't going back, not to their demands, not to their betrayal. I was done, and the weight of that decision was both terrifying and exhilarating. When I reached my apartment, the quiet was a balm. I tossed my keys onto the counter, poured a glass of red wine, and sank into the couch, the city's hum a distant lullaby. My phone buzzed relentlessly, missed calls from my mother, texts from Olivia, but I ignored them, letting the silence speak for me. The next morning, I opened my banking app, my finger hovering over the screen. Every month, for years, I'd sent $2,100 to keep my family afloat. $500 for their mortgage, $600 for utilities, electricity, water, internet, and maintenance. Then there were the extras: Parker's endless tuition, Olivia's designer whims, my mother's suggested holiday gifts. It added up to hundreds of thousands, a fortune I'd poured into a void. I tapped the cancel recurring payments button, the screen flashing, successfully canceled. A rush of relief washed over me, like shedding chains I'd carried too long. But freedom came with a cost. By noon, my phone was a battlefield. My mother's first voicemail was a masterclass in guilt. "Danielle, how could you do this? The house is struggling. Family helps each other." I deleted it, my jaw tight. The second was sharper. "Don't be selfish. Call me back." Olivia's texts were venomous. "You're pathetic, Danielle. So petty and selfish. You've destroyed this family." Parker's call went to voicemail, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're a greedy leech cutting off mom and dad over nothing." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. Nothing? I'd given them everything. My money, my dreams, my future. And they dared call me greedy? My father's message was softer, but no less manipulative. "Danielle, reconsider. Your mother's upset. We're family." Family. The word felt like a lie, hollow as their promises. I stood at my kitchen counter, coffee steaming in my mug, and stared at my phone. Each message was a hook, trying to reel me back into their cycle of need. But I saw it now. Their anger wasn't about love, it was about control. They didn't miss me, they missed my wallet. I opened my contact list, my thumb steady as I blocked their numbers one by one. Mom, Dad, Olivia, Parker. Their names vanished, and with them, the noise. For the first time in years, my apartment felt like a sanctuary, not a way station for their demands. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and let the peace settle in. Yet, I wasn't naive. Blocking their numbers wouldn't end this. They'd relied on me too long to let go easily, and their desperation would sharpen into something uglier. As I gazed out my window, the San Francisco fog curling over the bay, I braced myself. They'd come for me, not with apologies, but with accusations, maybe worse. My fingers tightened around my mug, a quiet resolve hardening in my chest. I'd spent a decade being their savior, but no more. They thought they could guilt me into submission, but they'd underestimated me. At 40, I was no longer the dutiful daughter, bending to their whims. I was a woman reclaiming her life, and they'd soon feel the weight of that truth. The silence stretched through the day, a fragile gift I knew wouldn't last. I went about my routine, emails, meetings, a jog through Golden Gate Park, but my mind churned, anticipating their next move. They'd always seen me as a resource, not a person, and my refusal to play that role was a threat they wouldn't ignore. As dusk painted the sky in hues of amber, I stood on my balcony, the city lights flickering below. I'd given them everything, but now I was taking it back. My money, my peace, my future. They were mine again, and no amount of their rage could change that. 3 weeks of silence felt like a miracle, a fragile bubble of peace I hadn't known in years. My San Francisco apartment had become a haven, free from the relentless buzz of my family's demands. At 40, I was rediscovering myself, jogging along the bay, diving into work, even signing up for a photography class I'd always postponed. But I wasn't foolish enough to think they'd let me go. My family thrived on control, and my defiance was a wound they'd never ignore. When my phone buzzed with a message from my mother, family meeting, 7:00 p.m., Sacramento. "This is your responsibility." My stomach twisted. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a summons, and I knew exactly what awaited me. I drove the 90 miles to Sacramento, the familiar red brick house looming like a stage set for confrontation. A foolish part of me hoped for remorse, but as I stepped onto the porch, my mother's fake smile greeted me, her eyes sharp as knives. Inside, Parker's BMW and Olivia's pink Mini Cooper sat in the driveway, a smug declaration of their presence. My father sat stiffly in the living room, Parker and Olivia sprawled on the couch, their grins dripping with triumph. I pulled out a chair, crossed my legs, and forced my voice to stay even. "So, what's this about?" My father cleared his throat, his tone heavy. "We need to resolve this tension, Danielle." I let out a dry chuckle. You mean the fact that I stopped paying your bills? My mother's voice was syrupy, a practiced act. You overreacted, Danielle. We only wanted what's best for you. Parker scoffed, leaning forward. Did you even think before cutting us off? It's childish. My jaw clenched, fury simmering. Childish. I've kept you afloat for a decade. Mortgage, utilities, your tuition. If anyone's childish, it's you, leeching off me while mocking my sacrifices. Olivia's voice was soft, venomous. You're just mad about the will. Stop playing the victim. I stood, my gaze sweeping their faces. I came hoping you'd see your mistake. But you're still the same, selfish, ungrateful leeches. My mother shot up, her voice ablade. If you walk out, don't expect to be welcomed back. I turned, my hand on the doorknob, my words ice cold. I never was. The drive back was a blur, my heart pounding with defiance. But when I reached my apartment, my breath caught. My door was sealed shut, a thick layer of grayish-white expanding foam spilling over the frame, hardened like cement. My pulse raced as I opened my security camera app, rewinding the footage. There he was, Parker, in a gray hoodie, his cap pulled low, smirking as he sprayed foam across my door, each motion a deliberate insult. My hands clenched, fury boiling in my veins. He thought he could intimidate me, scare me into submission. He was wrong. I stood in the hallway, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows, and let the anger settle into resolve. This wasn't just vandalism, it was a declaration of war. Parker assumed I'd crumble, that I'd crawl back to Sacramento begging for their forgiveness. But at 40, I'd learned to fight my own battles. I called the police, my voice steady as I explained the situation. A young officer arrived, his expression a mix of sympathy and professionalism. I showed him the footage, Parker's smug face unmistakable. Do you want to file a formal complaint? He asked, pen poised over his notebook. I let out a cold chuckle. I didn't call you for a chat. He nodded, starting the report. Parker's your brother, right? My gaze was steel. Not anymore. As the officer left, I stood before my sealed door, the foam a grotesque monument to their arrogance. They thought they could break me with petty stunts, but they'd miscalculated. I wasn't the Danielle who'd paid their bills without question. I was someone new, someone who'd fight back. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside, my phone heavy in my hand. This wasn't over, but for the first time I held the power, and Parker would soon learn what that meant. The morning after Parker's vandalism, my San Francisco apartment hallway smelled of chemical residue, the foam-sealed door a mocking reminder of my family's audacity. At 40, I'd faced their betrayal, their insults, their threats, but this was a line crossed, a gauntlet thrown. Standing in the dawn's pale light, my phone clutched tightly, I felt not fear, but a blazing resolve. They thought they could bully me into silence, but I was done being their pawn. Parker's smug smirk on the security footage fueled my determination. He'd learned that actions had consequences, and I was ready to deliver them. The police report was only the beginning. By noon, my father called, his voice heavy with feigned concern. Danielle, sweetheart, does this have to go so far? I leaned against my kitchen counter, the city's hum filtering through the window. Are you asking me to drop the charges? I said, my tone sharp. He hesitated. It's just... Parker was upset. He didn't mean harm. I scoffed, the sound harsh in the quiet. No harm? He sealed my door shut. What if I had a meeting today? What if I had a pet trapped inside? Silence stretched, his guilt palpable. He thought he could intimidate me, I continued, my voice like steel. I'll show him he picked the wrong person. I didn't wait for his excuses. Here's the deal, I said, my words deliberate. $33,000. That covers the door repair, legal fees if this drags out, and damages for harassment. It's reasonable. My father's voice cracked. That's extortion, Danielle. I chuckled, cold and unyielding. No, Dad, it's consequences. Parker doesn't have the money. You and Mom can cover it. You've been bailing him out his whole life. He stammered. You're tearing this family apart. I hung up, my pulse steady. They'd built this mess, not me. 3 days later, my bank account pinged. $33,000, transferred from my parents' joint account. No apologies, no messages, just silence. For the first time, they'd paid a price. But their defeat was temporary. Soon, my inbox flooded with messages from distant relatives, their words a chorus of judgment orchestrated by my mother. Aunt Susan. I'm disappointed, Danielle. Your parents sacrificed everything, and this is how you repay them? Uncle Mark. Don't let money make you lose your humanity. Family is forever. Cousin Rachel. You're heartless abandoning your parents like this. They're about to lose their home. I read each one, a mix of amusement and disgust swirling in my chest. My mother had spun a tale, casting me as the villain, a greedy daughter who'd cut off her struggling family. It was a lie, and I wouldn't let it stand. I opened my laptop, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I rarely post online, but today I'd reclaim my truth. My fingers flew across the keyboard, each word a blade carving through their deception. I tried to be a good daughter, but my family never loved me, I wrote. For over a decade, I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, mortgage, utilities, my siblings' tuition. I never complained, believing family supports each other. But when my parents wrote their will, they left everything to Parker and Olivia. When I asked why, they said, "You have a career." When I stopped paying, they called me selfish. Now they spread lies that I've abandoned them, that they're losing their home. The truth? They're only losing the money I gave for years. I share this not for pity, but for anyone exploited by family. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. I hit post, my heart pounding with defiance. Within hours, the post exploded, hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. Strangers wrote, "You're so strong, Danielle. You don't owe them anything." Friends added, "I've been there. Keep shining." But there were critics too. Family's flawed, but airing this is shameful. I didn't care. The truth was out, raw and unfiltered. My mother called that evening, her voice a hiss of rage. "Danielle, what the hell are you doing? You're destroying our reputation." I stood on my balcony, the San Francisco skyline glittering below, and smiled. "No, Mom," I said calmly. "You did that when you made me the villain in your story." She sputtered, "You'll regret this." I hung up, the phone's weight light in my hand. Regret? No. For the first time, I felt free. The $33,000 was a victory, but the post was my liberation. They couldn't hide behind lies anymore. As I sipped wine, the city's lights a constellation of possibility. I knew they'd fight back, harder, dirtier. But at 40, I was no longer the daughter who'd bend. I was a woman who'd claimed her voice, and no one could silence me now. Months after my Facebook post, the San Francisco fog felt like a cleansing veil, washing away the last traces of my family's hold on me. At 40, I stood on the precipice of a life I'd never dared imagine, one where my time, my money, my heart were mine alone. The silence that followed my public truth was profound, no longer punctuated by guilt-laden calls or venomous texts. The void left by their absence wasn't a loss. It was space, vast and open, for me to rebuild. I'd once thought their betrayal, cutting me out of the will, was a wound. But now, as I sipped coffee on my balcony, the city's pulse syncing with my own, I saw it for what it was, a gift of freedom. With no one leeching off my income, I poured my energy into passions I'd shelved for years. I enrolled in a photography class, my camera capturing the golden hues of the Golden Gate Bridge at dusk, each click a step toward rediscovery. I traveled, something I'd postponed while funding my family's whims. In Paris, I sat by the Seine, the river's ripple mirroring my newfound calm. 6 months later, I stood atop Machu Picchu, the Andean wind fierce and alive, whispering that I was enough, just as I was. My bank account, once a sieve for their endless needs, now grew, a testament to my reclaimed autonomy. For the first time, I was responsible only for myself, and that weightlessness was worth more than any inheritance. Then came Alex, a quiet breeze in a life I'd stopped expecting to surprise me. We met on a hiking trip in Yosemite, his laughter cutting through the forest's stillness. He was different. No demands, no expectations, just a steady presence that saw me, not what I could offer. Over campfire conversations, I shared my story, my voice steady, unashamed. He listened, his eyes warm, never once asking me to justify my choices. With Alex, I didn't need to buy love or prove my worth. I only needed to be Danielle, and that was enough. Our connection grew, rooted in mutual respect, a stark contrast to the transactional bonds I'd once called family. News of my old family trickled in, not through their voices but through whispers from mutual acquaintances. My mother, once commanding with her demands, now worked as a waitress at a Sacramento diner, her designer purses replaced by an apron's practical weight. My father, silent through every injustice, labored at a construction supply store, his hands roughened by a life he'd never planned. Parker, who'd mocked me as he sealed my door, was unemployed, his startup dreams crumbling without my subsidies. Olivia, forever chasing Instagram stardom, floundered, her vacations and couture outfits a memory no one would fund. They were struggling, each tethered to the consequences of their greed, but I felt no guilt. I'd given them a decade of chances, and they'd squandered everyone. Standing on my balcony one December evening, the city lights shimmering like scattered stars, I reflected on the journey. A year ago, I'd sat at that Sacramento dinner table, hoping for love, only to find betrayal. I'd poured hundreds of thousands into a family that saw me as a means, not an end. But their decision to cut me out had been my salvation. It forced me to see the truth, to break free, to build a life where I was the priority. My mother's threats, Parker's vandalism, their lies, they'd tried to chain me, but I'd slipped free, stronger for it. Now I live unburdened, my heart no longer a ledger of their demands. My story isn't just mine, it's a beacon for anyone trapped by those who should cherish them most. If you've ever felt used, drained by the very people meant to lift you, know this. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Sometimes losing a toxic family isn't a wound, it's wings. I found mine, soaring above the ruins of their betrayal, and I have no regrets. What about you? Have you faced a family that took more than they gave? Share your thoughts below, and let's talk about what it means to choose yourself. Because in the end, that's the greatest victory of all.